Hello everyone, and welcome to my UK Royal Family News channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Royal Family IV. Biden's incredibly sad announcement again ignores Charles. After missing Charles' coronation, the US president announced in April that he would pay a state visit to Britain. US President Joe Biden, who is scheduled to visit Britain next month, has ignored King Charles. After missing Charles' coronation, the White House announced in April that Mr. Biden will make a state visit to greet the monarch. On a journey that is focused on a summit of the NATO military alliance, Mr. Biden's travel to London in July is only one stop. According to the Daily Mail, there won't be an 82-bun salute or banquet at Buckingham Palace like there was when President Donald Trump was honored with a full state visit 4 years ago. The same article claims that when Mr. Biden spoke to King Charles before his and Queen Camilla's coronation at Westminster Abbey, no invitation for a state visit was given. There was never a state visit invitation, according to a source. The goal was to dispel news stories about Biden shunning Charles over the coronation and demonstrate that they got along well. The White House also succeeded in messing everything up. With one small adjustment at Buckingham Palace, King Charles horrifies the art world. Attempts by King Charles to reduce emissions at Buckingham Palace have reportedly alarmed the art world. King Charles' decision to lower the temperature at Buckingham Palace is said to have alarmed the art world. In an effort to reduce emissions, the palace and other royal residences' thermostats were lowered at 19°C throughout the winter. The Shipbuilder and His Wife by Rembrandt, a favorite artwork of the late Queen, is 2 degrees below the ideal temperature for such works. According to Daily Mail diarist Ephraim Hardcastle, curators have determined that 21–24°C is the ideal temperature for keeping artworks in their finest condition, with harm probable if temps are kept too high or too low. Surely, the surveyor of the king's pictures would be aware of that, thought the author. But in 2020, that position was eliminated. A number of royal sustainability initiatives are highlighted in sovereign grant accounts that were just published this week, including a concerted effort to reduce occupied room set points to 19°C during the winter, as well as educate staff to turn down the temperature in vacant rooms to 16°C and be more aware of the potential for reducing heat loss. Before ascending to the throne, Charles made numerous speeches emphasizing the value of the environment, combating climate change, and safeguarding animals. Even at Clarence House, he recycles bathwater, and he uses sustainable fuel in his Aston Martin. According to the sovereign grant accounts, Charles' reign has began with taxpayer-funded royal spending increasing for the second year in a straight. Net spending for 2022 to 23 grew by £5.1 million, or 5%, to £107.5 million. According to royal aides, this is because of the succession of monarchs, inflation, and the ongoing expense of repairing Buckingham Palace's plumbing, electrical, and heating. During 2022 to 2023, the sovereign grant remained constant at £86.3 million. The king's official activities and household are supported by a core element of £51.8 million, or 77p per inhabitant in the UK. Additional £34.5 million covers the palace's ongoing maintenance expenses. According to the reports, the royal household has once again fallen short of its diversity goal of having 10% of its staff come from racial or ethnic minorities, with the 2023 figure maintaining at 9.7% from the previous year. With personnel receiving wage rises of approximately 5 to 6%, payroll expenditures proved to be one of the highest yearly increases in spending during 2022 to 2023. Rising by £3.4 million to £27.1 million. After the COVID lockdowns, royal activities resumed at levels seen before the outbreak. Frogmore Cottage has also been abandoned by Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, a Buckingham Palace spokesman revealed. A relocation out of Prince Andrew's Royal Lodge House is reportedly being resisted, although the landlord would not comment on the potential next tenant. The nation has not experienced a year of grief, change, and celebration like the past 12 months, according to Sir Michael Stevens, keeper of the Privy Purse. These past 12 months have taken us from the Platinum Jubilee in the summer of last year to the sadness of Queen Elizabeth's passing and the election of our new sovereign in the autumn, via an incoming and outgoing state visit, and many months of work in preparation for the coronation of Their Majesties King Charles and Queen Camilla in the spring of this year, he continued. A representative for the palace stated that His Majesty has obviously supported the strategic direction of the royal households in its attempts to achieve net zero. In the short term, it is all about reducing our emissions where we have control over them and in adjusting room temperatures, whether that be during the working week or whether that be a limiting of the effect of heating on weekends, he continued. Or whether it's turning off the gas lamps where it's safe to do so as a step towards switching them over to electric operation, or even if it's the case that the heating on the swimming pool needs to be turned off. These are all areas which are about the steps that we can take to reduce our emissions, she continued. As a result of the cost of living crisis, Charles tightens his belt and spends heavily from his savings. The refurbishments at Buckingham Palace have been slowed down by the rising expense of living. But the king might be secretly content because he prefers living with the queen at neighboring Clarence House. The cost of living crisis has affected King Charles, but he has used reserves to increase his taxpayer-funded expenditure by 5% to £107.5 million over the past year. The 74-year-old king has dug deep into reserves, but has been forced to postpone significant projects due to the cost of inflation and growing power bills because he has not received an increase in his £86.3 million sovereign grant from the government for 3 years. A £369 million renovation of Buckingham Palace has been put on hold because there isn't enough money to fund the substantial 10-year project due to 10% inflation, rising energy costs, and other expenses. In the year ending March 31, 2023, the gas and energy bill for the palace nearly quadrupled, rising from £1.4 million to £2.7 million. At Buckingham Palace and other royal residences, the heating has been reduced in an effort to reduce emissions, both for economical and environmental reasons. Temperatures were set at 19°C during the winter, and a few degrees lower when rooms were unoccupied. But they have now been lowered, along with the heating in the swimming pool at Buckingham Palace, in response to King Charles's worries. Despite the slowdown this year, aides maintain that the palace renovation, which is scheduled to end in 2027, will still be completed on time and allow King Charles and Queen Camilla to move into the north wing of Buckingham Palace in 4 years. Other important maintenance tasks, however, had to be postponed until the economy picked up. The amount spent on property upkeep has been decreased by 10%. 4 years after downsizing and leaving their 21-room apartment at Kensington Palace next door to Prince William and Kate's sparsely occupied and comparable-sized property, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester's old residence, Apartment 1, still stands empty and is unfit for occupancy. Workers removed hazardous asbestos. However, due to a lack of funds, a thorough renovation of the property has been delayed. It joins a growing list of vacant homes on the royal estate, which also includes Frogmore Cottage at Windsor, the previous residence of Prince Harry and Meghan. The king has had to assist his workers in coping with the rising expense of life. To assist them in paying their energy bills, 2 payments were made in the spring and autumn. Following a salary and hiring freeze during the COVID-19 pandemic, staff members earned raises of 5 to 6%, and the number of employees paid for by taxpayers climbed from 491 to 517, which collectively resulted in a 14.3% increase in payroll expenses to £27.1 million. The information was published in the Sovereign Grant Report, which also showed that, in addition to the £28 million and £162 million expenses incurred by the UK government, The palace also spent £700,000 and £1.6 million of public money on the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and her funeral, respectively. The King's top financial advisor, Sir Michael Stevens, the keeper of the Privy Purse, stated, "The royal household has had an excellent year in many different ways." Covering the time frame of April 1, 2022 to March 31, 2023, it refers to a year of loss, transformation, and joy unlike any that our country has known in the last 7 decades. With the shift of the throne, Prince William has inherited the property empire of the Duchy of Cornwall, which saw an increase in profits of £24 million in the year ending on March 31 from £23 million. Between the first 6 months, when Charles was still in charge of the duchy, and the final 6 months, when William was in charge, he and his father divided the profits. William had $12.773 million, and Charles had £11.275 million after that. William took £5.9 million to support himself, his family, and his staff costs for the second half of the year, and left the remaining £6.873 million in the duchy as working capital to get through the change in ownership. William also received an undisclosed amount of money from his father in the first half of the year. The prince will follow his father's example in the future and declare the amount of tax he pays on his income, according to Kensington Palace. But after declining to do so for this transitional year, the palace came under fire for a perceived lack of transparency. "William has some explaining to do," said Graham Smith, chief executive of Republic, "because a change of monarch and heir is no excuse to row back on what little transparency there is." In part because the government had requested fewer royal excursions, according to palace officials, travel expenses had decreased from £4.5 million to £3.9 million. But some significant journeys remained. The King and Queen spent £146,000 on their first state visit to Germany and £187,000 on their trip to Rwanda for the Commonwealth Conference. William and Kate traveled to Boston, Massachusetts for £48,000. The King and his relatives frequently used gas-guzzling helicopters, notably to fly between their several royal homes, despite the royal family's efforts to advocate for environmental causes. The royal train, which is only used 4 times a year, has been given a respite while the king analyzes its potential uses in the future. However, advisors have hinted that it may eventually be abolished. Sir Michael claimed that the sovereign grant's fixed price constituted good value for money notwithstanding all the uproar. For ease of comparison, that equates to the equivalent of £77 per person in the UK on core funding of the sovereign grant, being £33 cheaper than a first-class stamp that bears the profile of our new king, he stated. Once the cost of service is included in, that amount increases by an additional 52p. Currently, the sovereign grant uses 25% of the Crown Estate's income as a baseline to decide how much tax money a monarch will get. Later in the summer, Sir Michael, Rishi Sunak, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, and the Treasury are anticipated to reassess the financing mechanism and recommend a lower percentage. A boom in offshore wind farms has caused the profits of the Crown Estate to rise by £130 million to £442.6 million, and the king has declared that he should not profit from this gain. Phil Dampier's analysis. The king will privately be happy that rising utility and inflation expenses have caused the enormous restoration work at Buckingham Palace to be delayed. Despite palace courtiers' assurances, it seems increasingly doubtful that the renovations would be completed on schedule in 2027. Charles, who has made Clarence House in London his home since 2003, certainly loves living there with the Queen, so he needn't worry too much. He has the ideal justification for staying in his comfortable John Nash-designed residence longer thanks to the disarray in the building. When her father, George VI, passed away in 1952, the late Queen Elizabeth also desired to remain there. But since he believed it to be more appropriate for the monarch, Prime Minister Winston Churchill encouraged her to relocate to Buckingham Palace. It's difficult to charge the royals with excessive expenditure given that the sovereign grant is still at £86.3 million and reserve funds are being used. However, Charles does have a significant issue that might draw attention. Simply put, he owns too many palaces. Clarence House, Highgrove, Birkhall, Dumfries House in Scotland, and various properties in Romania were among the holdings he already owned in addition to the usage of Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral, and Sandringham that he inherited from his mother. Thus, a quick solution to the game of homes is required. In Wiltshire, at Rainmill House, Queen Camilla also resides on her own. And the king has so far been unsuccessful in convincing Prince Andrew to relocate from Windsor's Royal Lodge to Frogmore Cottage, the former residence of Prince Harry. The surplus of royal mansions, however, is not a good picture for a so-called slimmed-down monarchy when families struggle to pay their bills, particularly as the new Prince of Wales has made homelessness one of his top issues. Some, like Windsor Castle, may need to be converted into museums, though they are still usable for important state banquets and events. Only ardent Republicans will object to paying for the late Queen's funeral and Platinum Jubilee. Additionally, after her passing, payoffs to royal household members and employees became necessary. The king's personal fortune was recently estimated by the Sunday Times Rich List at £600 million, which is significantly more than his mother's. The royal family has prospered financially during the past 10 years. It will be fascinating to see if a Treasury assessment of the funding formula suggests the king and queen join the rest of us in tightening their belts a bit. Thanks for watching if you like this video. So please don't forget to subscribe my channel and don't miss any update.